So, before this video begins, I like to state a few things. 1. If I sound really boring and monotone, that is because I'm reading off a sheet of paper. I'm not used to it. I have to get used to it more. So, the more I do these videos, the more I'll get used to it, and you guys won't be as annoyed or as bored by my voice. So, I'll give you options to skip through to certain parts, and I do get more interesting as I go through because, I get more used to it. But, if you just want to know which cars are the best via my calculations, just skip to the end. I will give you a time code here. Now, second, when you are watching my calculations, if you decide to do so, and that's fine, but there's one thing I do mention. I mentioned there's no friction. I have to mention other things too. There's no air resistance. It's a perfect world where the only things that actually matter are the vehicle's speed and velocity. Well, acceleration. Pretty much all the things that are physical or physically adept from the car, and nothing from the outside world. So these measurements are just about the vehicles. Nothing from the outside world is affecting these vehicles. So the measurement is in a perfect world. And that means it's a lot easier for us to calculate. We can put in friction, but if we assume that all the vehicles also have the same friction force, then the calculations won't come out much different. The rankings, at least. So, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Welcome back, guys. My name is Exeter, and today we are going to start a series that is relatively new for this channel. Hold the applause. Inside the game. In this series, I will be covering things that most discuss, but don't very much explain or understand themselves. I will break down information given to us by developers in one form or another to explain games' features and debunk common misconceptions. In the first episode, today's episode, we'll be covering the new fastest car in GTA 5. GTA 5 is renowned for its simulation of crime and parody on society as we know it. It also has some pretty beautiful cars, ranging from the monstrous Bugatti Veyron to the eco-friendly Teslas. But, of all these vehicles, which are the fastest within the game? It seems simple enough. Look at the top speed, but I think by the end of this video, I will wash away your misconception that top speed is the most important number, and the Fast and the Furious crew already knows this, memoriam to Paul Walker, and I will be explaining to you why. So where do we begin? First, we have to classify what makes a car the fastest. In this part 1 of 2, we'll stick to the basics and calculate what makes the fastest car, from first a quarter mile, then a full mile, and finally the most popular drag racing spot in Los Santos, the full length of the airport's runways. Now, the airport's runways isn't a standard measurement, so first we have to find how long it is. After measuring the length of the Los Santos International Airport's first runway using the scaler on the game's map, I found that the runway is give or take 1,000 meters. But to keep it interesting, I called it 982 meters, which is the same distance as the fully zoomed out scaler on the map. Coincidence? I think not. But because we measured the runway in meters, we then have to convert the quarter mile and full mile into meters as well. So after converting, we get 402.335 meters for a quarter mile, and 1,609.335 meters for a full mile. Now that we have the scale, we need the cars. And without a doubt, the fastest collection of cars in GTA 5 are the supercars. Now, why are the supercars the best? Besides their namesake, well, of all the vehicles in the game, the supercars have the greatest ratio of 0 to 60 time and top speed. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with 0 to 60 time, it is slang for the time it takes for a car to go from 0 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour, and is a common measurement in the automotive industry. And because all supercars are given both a top speed and 0 to 60 time on their purchasing page, we'll use those two factors as our basis of finding the fastest car in the game. So now that we have that, let's throw up all the given values of maximum velocity and speed for all cars in the game on screen. Had fun? Well, let's move on. Now that we have all the backstory and exposition out of the way, let's get to the numbers. To find the fastest car over certain distances, we need to find how long it takes for those cars to reach that distance. And to find that, we need to know how far the cars travel until they reach their top speed. To find that, we need to know their acceleration, and to find that, we first need to find the car's initial distance covered while accelerating from 0 to 60 miles per hour. The first formula we'll be working with is a basic distance formula. 1/2 times open parentheses final velocity plus the initial velocity close parentheses, and multiply that by the time it takes to reach this distance. To make our calculations less complex, we'll assume that there is no friction. And for this example, let's use the values of the newly added Pegasi Osiris. So to begin, we plug in 0 miles per hour for the initial velocity, 60 miles per hour for the final velocity, and 3.2 seconds is the time it takes for it to reach 0 to 60. That will give us something looking like this. We then calculate it out and get the wrong answer. What did we forget to do? Oh yeah, that's right. So we're working with meters per second as our velocity, but here it's miles per hour. So we need to convert the 0 miles per hour and 60 miles per hour into meters per second. After doing that, we get 42.91584 meters as the final answer for our distance. We can now go on to finding the second figure we are looking for, which is the vehicle's acceleration, by plugging in our newly calculated values into a different formula. Distance equals 1/2 times acceleration multiplied by time squared. We then plug in and solve for acceleration and get 8.382 meters per second per second. After reverse engineering the previous formula to find acceleration, we need to now find how long it takes, assuming that the acceleration we calculate is constant, to reach the individual vehicle's maximum velocity. To correctly calculate this value, we need to convert the vehicle's mile per hour measurement into meters per second. Then we use the formula acceleration equals velocity over time and calculate to find time. Once again, using the Osiris, we find that it takes 12.2666 seconds for it to reach its top speed of 230 miles per hour, or 102.819 meters per second from rest. Now we have the option of calculating the total distance it takes for these vehicles to reach their maximum velocity with two different formulas. Distance formula 1, distance equals 1/2 times acceleration multiplied by time squared, or distance formula 2, distance equals 1/2 times the final velocity plus the initial velocity and multiply that by the time. Well, it doesn't hurt to use both of the formulas, so why not? Distance formula 1 gives us 630.622 meters. The second distance formula gives us 630.620 meters. Yes, there is a slight difference of 0.002 meters or 0.00003%, but I think we can classify that deviation as a rounding error. But now that we have to decide which value to use, and no, the answer is not averaging the two values out, but instead lowering the decimal count, and we end up finding that both end up equaling 630.62 meters. Now that we have found how long it takes to reach maximum velocity, we know that for the quarter mile or 402 meter length, the vehicles will still be accelerating, which means to solve for time in those instances, we just need to use the distance formula, which includes acceleration, and solve for time. We can't use the distance formula, which uses velocity to find the time, because velocity in this circumstance is unknown. So when we use the distance formula to solve for time, in this case of a quarter mile, we get 9.7979 seconds. Now that we have the first time, we just need to find the final two times for when the car is traveling the length of a runway, or 982 meters, and a full mile, or 1609 meters. Well, instead of using one formula for this, we'll be using two different formulas and adding up their values. The first value is that of time it takes for the vehicles to reach their final acceleration. The second being how fast it takes for them to travel the rest of the distance until we reach 1 mile, or the length of a runway. Since we know that it takes 630.62 meters for the Osiris to reach its maximum velocity, we already have that time value. And to find the other values, we subtract the length of 1 mile or 1 runway by the distance it takes for the vehicle to reach its maximum velocity. In this case, those values will equal 351.38 meters for the runway and 978.713 meters for the mile. We then use the formula velocity equals distance over time to find how long it took for the vehicles to travel the leftover distance at their maximum velocity. We plug in our values of 102.819 meters per second as the velocity and the leftover distance as the distance, and we get 9.5188 seconds for 1 mile and 3.4336 seconds for the runway. We then add these newly calculated times with the previously calculated times needed to reach maximum velocity, and we get 21.7854 seconds for a mile and 15.70024 seconds for the runway. Now that I've shown how to calculate all unknown values using one supercar as an example, we can now find that same value using all the other supercars' information. Now, after calculating this for all 10 supercars, the data is as follows. For a quarter mile, the rankings from 10th to 1st proceed as such: Voltic, Cheetah, Vaca, Bullet, Entity, Osiris, Infernus, Adder, Turismo, Zentorno. The runway order from 10th to 1st is Voltic, Cheetah, Bullet, Entity, Infernus, Osiris, Vaca, Turismo, Zentorno, Adder. The final 1 mile time orders as Voltic, Cheetah, Bullet, Vaca, Infernus, Turismo, Entity, Zentorno, Osiris, Adder. Now that you know which car would win in a drag race, my work here is complete. And don't forget to watch part 2, where we will cover which supercars are the best at making turns. Now, sadly, after trying to calculate several things, I'm left with a choice, which I will ask you guys for your beliefs on what you think I should do, but there's an issue. So, we all know that, like, the Adder is a Bugatti in real life. We all know that a Vaca is a Lamborghini in real life. We all know that Infernus is a Ferrari in real life. Now, if you don't know that, that's okay. But we also all know that a Bullet is a Ford GT in real life. Well, if you go on the GTA wiki, you can actually see how much all of these different cars weigh. And that would be against what I would normally do, where I would look up the car's counterparts in real life and see how much the real cars weigh, and then put that against what they actually are in the game, and then use that as our weight calculation, you know, like you would. But there's an issue. So I went on GTA Wiki, and I see that for all the different cars put into the game, their weight is much less than their counterpart in real life, by about 1,000 pounds for each one of those vehicles. And this matters because they do not have in the DLC vehicles and their weight on the GTA 5 wiki, which means to find their weight, I would have to look at their counterparts in real life, because there is no actual way for me to calculate gravity or how to find gravity without knowing someone's weight or a vehicle's weight, which we do know now, which we can calculate gravity and then drop a car and try and measure that. Or I can find their counterparts in real life, which for all the other vehicles, they weigh differently. So I want to know what you guys think I should do. If I should just measure the cars that came with the game and forget about the Zentorno, Osiris, and Turismo. If I should try calculating the Zentorno, Osiris, and Turismo by dropping them and measuring how long it takes for them to fall, based against how long it takes other vehicles to fall, and calculate gravity that way. Or if I should just look at their real-life counterparts and kind of decide. So, please let me know what you guys think in the comments. If I get enough comments telling me one or the other, then I will do that. But I will put all the options on screen. I probably already have if I was smart. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video, this one-of-a-kind video, which has been on my channel. You guys have probably seen this before, but I tried putting my own style on it, tried putting on my own twist. If there's some changes you'd like me to make for the next episode, maybe change the background from a chalkboard to something else. It was a chalkboard if you couldn't understand. Or other things, then please let me know. My name is Exeter. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and yeah, so I'll see you next time.